Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting, show number 141. Our program is brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. In both locations, they make bacon that will change your life.
So the fact that they're branching out and making different restaurants, I don't know. I haven't been to the Italian restaurant, but I hope that they have the bacon there. I know that's not traditional Italian fare, but
okay, so
it's so good.
But if you think about it, there is like a spaghetti carbonara would have bacon in it. So there's some call for bacon in the Italian cuisines, right?
We'd have to look up the menu and see.
Yeah, well,
because bringing that bacon to the rest of this,
or we could just plan
baconless world
to go.
Yeah,
there's
we
that.
Should do that.
Yeah,
if you guys, if you've never
hands-on research,
so the bacon comes out and it's like this thick, and
at first you're like, well, this is not the kind of bacon I like. I like thin, crispy bacon, and
so
then
good.
you take your first
Oh
bite.
yeah.
Oh my
it's
God,
covered with blue cheese and truffle oil. And,
it's amazing.
beautiful.
It's like. I didn't know. I didn't know. They need to make a thing called "I didn't know it was bacon." I can't believe it's not. I can't believe it's not bacon, or it is bacon. Anyway, so welcome back to the show. Our guest is Dave Mitton. Dave is the global brand ambassador from Corby Brands, but you deal specifically with Canadian whiskey. Is that right?
Yeah. For the last 5 years, I've been looking after all of their Canadian whiskeys. I am there if there is another Canadian brand that we might have in another market, whether it be something like Ungava Gin, which is a very popular Canadian gin, or if it was one of their rums. But 99% of the time, I look after the Canadian whiskeys.
So are you Canadian originally? Were you born in Canada?
Born and raised.
And what part?
East Coast.
East Coast, really?
New Brunswick, kind of by Nova Scotia, if anyone's not familiar with Canadian geography, right by Maine and Vermont.
May I just take a moment to compliment you on your oysters?
Well, thank you.
Because they're wonderful.
That cold Atlantic water.
Oh, man.
Some of the best seafood in the world.
Yeah, living here in Texas has its pleasures. Tex-Mex comes to mind. But I do not
Gulf Coast
eat
shrimp is particularly awesome.
The shrimp is okay, but I do not eat oysters that came out of that warm Gulf water. Oh, no. That's a good way to get sick. But those cold water oysters, and it almost feels like the further north you go, the colder the water gets, the tastier the oysters can be.
Yep. But you head up north to Newfoundland.
Yeah.
And, it's in between Iceland and us, and it's beautiful water.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Well, so you were Canadian born and raised, and do you live in Canada now, or you live here in the States because of your duties?
Yeah, well, I joke. I pay rent in Toronto.
Okay, gotcha.
I pay that good old Toronto rent. I'm not there very often. I travel a lot. I mean, it's been 54 flights since January 8th.
Yeah.
So it's constant travel.
We had before he passed away, we had Dave Pickerel from Whistle Pig on the show, and he told us he finally just sold his house because he was on the road so much that he actually didn't have an actual domestic domicile or whatever you call it.
That's a weird kind of homeless.
It really is. You're staying in nice hotels and going around the world, talking about your whiskey and yet I guess there's a P.O. box somewhere where his mail would go to. But
I've had that discussion, but it is just that like those few days a month you are home
when you get to actually.
It's nice to unlock your door and be like, that is my sofa, that is my bed. I'm alone.
Totally get it.
You just don't want to be in a hotel room again.
Right. I totally get that. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess the biggest question that we would have to ask any global brand ambassador is, how in the hell did you get that job?
Yeah, it sounds pretty made up. I guess my background, as I say, I grew up in small town Canada, East Coast, and I decided I didn't want to do the university thing and told my parents I was going to go see the world. They said, that sounds like a fantastic idea. I hope you've got enough money to do it. And
Yep.
And I set sail, essentially, and I did. I went backpacking for years, and I had to pay my way and found myself in the bar and restaurant industry. Worked from nightclubs to saloons, from Australia to Los Angeles and everywhere.
No kidding, really?
For years.
That far flung, though?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did. I wanted to see the world. And it was, cheap cheap flights as you could find, and
Sure.
you know, as my parents said, they're like, do it while you're 18 to
Right.
24.
Yeah. That's
when you can
absolutely
sleep
right.
on a floor somewhere, because you don't
Yeah.
want to do that in your
Right.
40s.
Right. You don't want to do it in your 40s. You certainly don't want to do it once you have family responsibilities.
Exactly.
And, you know, it's totally the way to go. Quick sidebar: working in bars in so many different locations, like are the bars in, let's say, Australia, for example, are they just the same as the ones in the U.S. or Canada, or are there obviously, other than the accents and things and the products that are available, but like the whole vibe is it
Same
different?
bar personalities.
Yeah.
And everything.
Generally vibes are the same. You'll find a norm at every bar you go to almost.
That's wonderful.
But I mean, yeah, it's different cultures. So I
Yeah.
mean, there'll be different cocktail crazes or
Right.
beer crazes or spirit crazes. That's for sure. There's a difference
Because
there.
I know if you think like an Irish pub, for example, it has its own sort of vibe to it that's different from, say, a corner bar in the United States, unless it's
Or an ice house.
or an ice house, right? And so I was just wondering, are there things like that might be unique to, you know, the bars in Australia or different places like that? So
Well, I mean, when it comes to, I worked at an Irish bar in Cairns, Australia, for a while, and I'm like, that's the beauty of Irish bars. Any town,
Right,
in any
right.
country in the world, if you need to go find an Irish bar, you can.
and all
they're
of
always
them,
busy.
Yeah, and all of them imported their main bar from Ireland, or so they say. You know, remember, is that always true? Like they always go, yes, this came from the so-and-so pub in Ireland. Yeah, okay. How many pubs in Ireland still have bars at this
Right,
point?
right.
Because
Yeah, cleared out.
they've shipped them out all over the place.
I'll tell you one thing that was different with Australia was it was not a big tipping policy, but it was the wage, the salary.
So you made more money,
You
but
made
less in tips.
I made over $20 an hour bartending,
Wow.
and you didn't really make tips. And then I smartened up 6 months into it and said, I'm going to go work at a tourist bar.
Where the
Where it's
tourists
all
don't
Americans
know.
and Canadians coming in and they tip. So
Yeah,
it's like,
everyone
you
tips.
still wouldn't make much, but you'd make enough to pay for your
Yeah,
food the
have
next
some
day
extra-
and your
have some
hostel room.
Folded money, yeah.
But it was a lot of the owners would say, we love hiring Canadians and Americans
Mm-hmm.
because you guys, it's bred into you. You hustle for tips, even
Yeah.
though you're not making tips.
Even though
You
you-
work, you work fast. So that was also back in the '90s, aging myself. So it was
So-
different times.
So at a certain point, you got into the representation side of the spirits industry,
well,
right?
I ended up coming back to Canada and I moved to Toronto. I went to see some friends. Literally, was going to be passing through. Started taking some courses. Found myself settling in. A friend convinced me, let's open a bar. I said, yeah. Like in my
It always seems like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
24,
now we're
I'd
getting
love to
into
be
it.
rich. Let's open a bar.
I learned a long time ago that this lifelong dream that I've had to open a bar really has nothing to do with wanting to be in the bar industry. What I learned was that all I really wanted to do was to be able to walk in the front door and go, drinks for everyone. And I could do that and actually pay for it out of my pocket a lot cheaper than I could actually own a bar.
Yeah,
So
that's for sure.
So that's so every now and then it may happen.
But it was
Bar patrons be warned. I may walk in the front door and
You got to take that moment to look around and see how many people are in the bar first.
yes, exactly.
yeah, you want to do a little bar. You don't want to do some nightclub
Yeah.
where it's bottle service only.
Right. Oh no! I just realized Beyonce and Jay-Z are here. I'm screwed. So you got you got a chance to open a bar. How did it go?
First one, I ended up opening 5 different bars.
No
in
kidding.
Toronto.
So they must have done pretty well, or you wouldn't have kept going, right?
How
For-
long did it take you to learn not to stick your finger in fire?
That was way before I owned bars and restaurants, but that was a couple times. You know what? The first one's interesting. Like, I've done podcasts with people interviewing me just on that first bar because there's a whole story to that.
And was it in Toronto, right?
It was in Toronto. It was an old butcher shop from 1923, 3 levels that had been shut down for decades. And we ended up getting the space, and we were 2 guys in our early 20s, not knowing what we were getting into. We had to rebuild 4 floors of it. It took us 2.5 years.
Wow.
Cocktails were not really a thing yet, except New York City and London, UK. We wanted to try cocktails. City was not ready for it. We did a different food. We did something ridiculous in 2004. We decided to sell local beer and local wine.
Wow.
And do local spirits when everyone would come in and go, what is your goddamn problem? This stuff is not cheap. And,
Now,
and it's like,
now you'd be a hero.
Yeah.
A hero of the scene. But you're right. Back then, that was unusual. Yeah, it
very
absolutely
unusual.
was.
Classic cocktails. Guys would walk in and go, I'll have one of those Manhattans. And they'd send it back. I'm like, is there a problem? I'm like, it's straight booze.
That's a Manhattan.
You've read the description. Never mind. So here's a Stolian raspberry with some soda. Learned a lot from that. We made a bit of a name for ourselves. We got some great accolades. That got put on a list as one of the top 5 bars in the world from a place in England, which was really cool.
That is awesome.
But what I learned was publicity does not pay your bills.
Right.
I lost my shirt on it, lost some family money on it I had to pay back. Financially kind of crippled us a little bit, but we were young enough to come back. Did a couple of the little spots, ended up doing one place called the Harvard Room, where that was kind of our baby. It got some great accolades, ran it for 10 years. And the story with that is I ended up selling enough of these particular whiskeys there that the company came to me at one point and said, "So
what are you doing?
We noticed you're selling more of this than really anyone else in Canada right now.
That's interesting.
How do you feel about going on the road with it?" And essentially kind of started off as a part-time gig with them and my 2 business partners at the restaurant. I'm like, sounds like a great opportunity to get out and see the world a little bit and say hi to people and introduce them. And at that time, I still had the restaurant, so it was cross-pollination.
Right.
Oh, if you come to Toronto, come see my place. Come do
Right,
this. And
right,
it was
right.
always...
So were you selling a lot of those particular products because you were selling a lot of everything? Or was there a reason those were so big at your bar?
I was selling a lot of everything, and we were we were a small space, but we were pretty... I think
Did
I'd
a
safe
big
to say
volume.
well-respected cocktail bar in Toronto.
Yeah, did a big bunch.
Toronto's a big city. I think there's close to 8 million people there, and it's we were lucky. The seats were full. Very fortunate. Had a great staff there. I loved all spirits. I loved all whiskeys.
An equal opportunity spirit lover.
I did have a thing for Canadian whiskeys, and you got to think of it this way. It's like going to Australia. Australian wine doesn't have the greatest... people don't view Australian wine the same way they view
France or
and Italy.
California.
Now, when you're in Australia and you go to the vineyards and you taste and you have some of the wines that are not available outside of Australia. Same thing with Canada. You're in there and I'm getting to play with Canadian whiskeys that are not available outside of Canada at this point, and I'm loving them.
Yeah,
I love my American whiskeys. I sold many bourbons and American ryes on the back bar and our cocktails. But particularly some of these are very unique to Canadian whiskey.
So where should we start in terms of tasting?
I'd say you'd start with the Pike Creek.
With the Pike Creek.
It's our lightest style.
Would you like to affix this to our Mr. Thingamajiggy or whatever you go? Oh, it's manual today. I didn't realize that. We had some camera placement issues, I think, today. So the Pike Creek.
We just ran out of cameras.
Just ran out of cameras.
The Pike Creek. Tell us about this particular spirit.
Put this away over here. Pike Creek. So, I mean, Canadian whiskey in itself, as you were saying before, it's a category. I kind of joke. It's in the U.S. It's almost like Canadians itself. Like, everyone knows it exists. No one knows a whole lot about it.
Well, I think most people can only name 2 Canadian whiskeys anyway.
There's 2 extremely popular brands that you can go to the East Islands of Thailand or New Zealand or all across Texas, that's for sure, and see them on any back bar.
I can tell you that you already are kind of speaking my language because this whiskey was finished in rum barrels, and I'm a big fan of rum and have discovered that some of my favorite whiskeys are those that are finished in rum barrels.
Yep.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to checking this out.
Absolutely. I'll give you a little rundown on it. I mean,
you can. I'm doing research over here already.
Yes.
You can definitely taste that rum barrel influence on the back end of this. It's very, very like cane sugar and banana influence there.
And this is just so we understand everything correctly. This is available. People can find this in retail stores in the United States. This is not a difficult thing to find, or you don't have to go to Canada now to get this, correct?
You do have to stop and look at the Canadian whiskey section.
Yeah. At least in most stores, that's how it's That's how it's metered out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is readily available, and like you say, it's a 10-year-old majority corn whiskey finished in rum casks for under $30, correct? Every state might be off $1 or $2, but it's under $30.
Wow.
It's pretty good.
It is super tasty. This has just got loads of those oak and sort of vanilla and kind of rich rum flavors on the finish, but it's still very much a whiskey. It still feels like a whiskey going down. It's still got that whiskey corn flavor up front. Ian, help me out here. How am I doing?
Oh, this is pretty solid right here. It's the flavors like this right here has a sweetness that's not too sticky. It's not a lingering sweetness.
Correct.
It actually goes down pretty clean. Leaves a little more mineral water kind of aftertaste, and then the retrohale has a whole bunch of that oakiness going on, which is really nice.
Tip of your tongue, it's like, say, majority corn, so you get that soft sweetness. You get there's a little bit of rye blended into it, so you get that spice on the back, a little bit of heat. But for me, I mean, I get the Christmas cake, the little bit of molasses, like that rich Caribbean
right, that molasses,
spice.
yes, for sure.
That was the thing that hit me first, was that cane sugar kind of molassesy kind of thing.
I was reading from the label here that it is it's aged in non-temperature controlled rooms when it's in the cask. What is the advantage of that?
I mean, first off, it's pretty unique. It was one thing when I started working with the distillery. One thing that drove me nuts when I started working with them. They were like, how do you I went down to learn to make the whiskey for a week with our master blender, and I said, what do you think? At the end, I said, this is incredible, and I'm kind of pissed off. And they're like, why? And I said, I've been buying your damn whiskeys for almost 20 years, and this is an hour flight from Toronto. And the point of mine going on was, I said, we're not educating people on this category or these brands. Like, how do I not know all of this stuff? So that's been our main focus the last 5 years, is complete education.
And that's really the primary thing that a brand ambassador does, right?
Yeah.
Is educate people about the brand.
Engagement and advocacy.
Wow.
I mean, it's the soft sell.
I love it. I love it.
But the warehouses, so where we're located is Windsor, Ontario, most southern tip of Canada, right across from Detroit. We take Ubers to Detroit from the distillery.
That's
how
cool.
close it is.
That's cool.
So great history of Hiram Walker Distillery and the city of Detroit over the years. Where our warehouses are situated, we have 16 warehouses, 1.6 million barrels of whiskey laying down.
Oh, wow.
And that part of town is called Pike Creek.
And thus the name of the whiskey.
Pike Creek is a whiskey, the story of maturation. For instance, during the summer months, in another few weeks, it's non-temperature controlled warehouses, as you say, will be as hot as Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay. So
temperatures rise, and it is humid.
That kind of vibe or temperature or distillation atmosphere, I guess is the way to say.
And I mean, the
that
barrels
you get for a Tennessee whiskey.
The barrels they're expanding.
Yeah, big time.
It is so warm inside of there. And I mean, it's a few 100,000 barrels in each warehouse. Enough alcohol going through that if we were to show up and just open the door, and you said, I'm going to walk to the other side, I'm like, you won't make it. You'll pass out and be asphyxiated, and we'd have to drag you out before it got worse. But it's pretty incredible.
I sense a new Olympic event, by the way.
Right?
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, I love it.
But then it's the opposite, because we're still in Canada, and that part of the world, it's right.
So it's going to get pretty cold in the wintertime, right?
It goes to the opposite, where it's like in Celsius, it's 40 degrees in the summer, and then in the winter it goes to minus 40, which is the only time Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up.
Right.
So that's still minus 40 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Everything in those warehouses just freeze up completely tight, like frost over top of the barrels. Everything except the whiskey freezes.
Right.
So that really slows down the aging process.
Sure.
But it's only a few months, and they say, and I can't tell you anywhere else where it would get that cold but yet that hot for aging in the world. Not even different parts of Canada where there are other large distilleries,
have that,
it stays colder.
Swing.
You don't get that heat. So it is quite unique.
That is interesting. Speaking of aging, I also noticed on the bottle that it says 10-year-old, which means the youngest the youngest
correct.
whiskey in here is 10 years old.
That is a Canadian rule.
For something that is, what did you say, a $30 and under price point to be 10-year aged, I think it's pretty remarkable, actually. You know,
Well, this is one.
not going to get that everywhere.
I got a buddy who's a rum aficionado. I mean, he doesn't really drink whiskey, but this is, as you can imagine, this is one that he does
This is
dabble
one that he
in.
Right,
likes.
right.
Sure, yeah.
And he's like, this is my cigar whiskey. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Out of
I
all
can
the
see
different
that.
scotches you could choose,
yep,
but this is his.
No, because
see it
the
go well.
the flavor profile would really support a good, even a medium-bodied cigar, I think, and wouldn't obliterate it. Would complement it reasonably well.
It's a great introductory whiskey to someone who might not be into whiskeys, or if you've got someone who loves
Mm-hmm. Right.
rum or cognacs,
Right.
this is a great way to
Yeah,
get them into
me
it.
being a fan of rum, I instantly loved this
Yeah.
because it had, the really recognizable flavor profile on the finish. So
Well, and that big temperature swing you're talking about when you're aging in the barrels, that just imparts a lot of that barrel into the whiskey.
we get
Oh,
a big
absolutely.
temperature swing here in Houston, Texas, as well. We can go from, let's say,
105.
Well, we can go from 40 degrees to like 104 degrees. So that's our temperature swing.
big
but
swing.
It's a big it's a big
It can
different
do
one.
that in a day, by the way.
In the summertime, however, we often are looking for very sessionable and drinkable beers. And by the way, we do only high-tech sound effects on this show. I'm sure you've noticed
Yes,
because of the little sound effect
we
machine.
either use this very high-tech
Yes.
device here,
Yeah,
or
or-
we do them actual.
Yes, yeah, which is a really unique way to do sound effects. So, I just opened a can of No Label Brewing's Mojito Lime Gose, and this is, I'm pretty sure, brand new. I just saw it for the first time, and I'm going to pour and pass. And I have to say, I'm really curious about this because I love mojitos, I love lime, I love gozes. I'm
This smells
a little. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it
It
off or not. I'm gonna
smells
be
a
totally
little
honest with you.
minty.
Yeah,
It really does.
Yeah, I think as a matter of fact,
Like, but I've never put a beer to my nose that
well,
smelled
and
minty.
of course there's mint in a mojito.
Yes,
this says on the can, it says tracing its origins back to Sir Francis Drake and a favorite of Hemingway. The mojito has long been associated with the heat. Mojito lime is our interpretation brewed with spearmint and lime. So it's actually brewed with spearmint for a nice, refreshing summer libation. No scurvy here. And I'm curious, Ian, you've done some research, so what are your thoughts?
This is incredibly unique.
Yeah.
Like,
bet.
this is so different from any other beer. It's mojito. If you like mojito, you're gonna probably like this beer. It's got kind of a. It doesn't look that thick, but it has a little bit thicker mouthfeel.
Has more
to it.
viscosity
Yeah.
than you would expect, yes.
It's so interesting. It does so many weird things. Like, from the first sip, you taste that mint and that lime is so strong, and then you get the beer flavor right in the middle, and then as the finish comes up, it cleans up pretty quick, but then leaves you with minty freshness.
Yeah, which is a weird thing for beer.
It's a little strange.
I-
I'm on the fence right now.
I am a little bit too. I find that it's a beer. My initial reaction is it's something I would really love to taste. Not sure if it would be something I would drink.
You know, the
You know what I
fact
mean?
that it's a Gose gives you that little bit of sour in there, which I think kind of makes it acceptable in some
Well, if you
ways
think
too.
Goses are generally
'Cause
they go apple
this
or
is
watermelon or
This is
something
not a
like
Bud
that, right?
Light lime.
No, it's definitely
this-
it's much better than that.
Yeah, you can tell that this is a crafted experience here versus
Mm-hmm.
people like to put this in our beer, so we're just going to put it in our beer for you.
The lime actually tastes like real lime as
Yes.
opposed to lime
Like lemon
floor
or
cleaner.
Like
Uh,
floor cleaner.
which is lemon pledge. Yes, that's right. I like it, Ian. I'm just not sure. Like, I don't think I could have several of these at a time. You know?
Yeah, agreed. I don't know that after the first can of this that I would reach for a second one, but it's definitely interesting. And I will tell you this, if you see it on the shelf, it's probably worth grabbing one to share like we're doing now and just talk about
And
it.
just talk about it,
because
yeah.
it's fun and it's different.
Well, and that's what I love. And No Label. These guys have
they're fearless.
they really have gone to the edges of wherever they wanted to go in terms of what they've made. So I salute them for doing this. 5.2%, by the way. So you could put down a few of these if you wanted to. What do you think?
I agree. It's completely unique, very different. It's very authentic, though. It's the first thing I thought. I'm like, there's nothing about this seems artificial. Great mouthfeel. I could see people crushing these on a hot summer day in a patio.
I will say that sometimes we have found that when we do a segment where we're drinking a spirit or whiskey and also a beer in the same segment, sometimes we have found some amazing combinations of things that really one brings out all kinds of interesting and awesome things in the other. This is not one of those times.
Nope, not at all.
This doesn't necessarily. These two don't necessarily complement each other, so you can strike them off the great pairing list. But I will say, I think everybody should try this, if for no other reason than to support No Label for doing something this creative and interesting.
I love No Label for the fact that they're just so fearless.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they will try anything, and they have usually pretty fun names for their beers. So.
Yes, they do. All right, we're going to take a break, and we will be back. We have more whiskeys to taste, and we also have more beer. The next one is from Bare Bottle Brew Company in San Francisco, California. It's the Secret Path to Paradise IPA, and I'm looking forward to going. We'll be right back at Smoking and Toasting.
It's all right.
Your reaction was